On our newscast tonight, the MERS virus kills 2 people in Korea, and that number may grow as suspected cases are added, while hundreds more have been placed under quarantine. And Korea posts a current account surplus for the 38th straight month in April, but it's not all good news as both exports and imports fall. Rescue efforts are ongoing in China's Yangtze River, where a passenger ship with over 450 people capsized a day ago. It's a battle against time and the elements. All up next on Primetime News.
Hello, welcome to Primetime News on this Tuesday, June 2nd. I'm Daniel Choy.
And I'm Hwang Ji-hye. Thanks for tuning in. Once again, our starting point is the fast-spreading Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, outbreak, which has Korea on edge.
It looks like it's going to be our headliner for the next considerable days. Today, the country reported its first 2 deaths from the virus, while 6 new cases have emerged, bringing the total confirmed infections to 25.
And now we connect to our Kim Hyun-bin at the News Center for the latest. Hyun-bin, what have officials revealed about these 2 deaths?
Well, guys, health authorities are on high alert. As you noted, Korea's health ministry reported the country's first 2 deaths from the virus earlier today. The first was a 58-year-old woman who died on Monday. She was initially hospitalized for severe asthma, but doctors say her condition worsened after she came into close contact with the first confirmed MERS patient at the same hospital. She was only suspected of having the virus, but testing after her death confirmed its presence. The second person to die from MERS was a 71-year-old man who was known to be the 6th MERS patient. He was receiving treatment in an isolation ward after contracting the disease from the first patient. Now 6 more people have tested positive Tuesday for MERS. But what's even more alarming is 2 of them were found to have tertiary infections, meaning they contracted the virus from a secondary infected patient. Korea's health ministry says it's possible that more tertiary patients could pop up in the next few days. Meanwhile, 800 people who had contact with MERS patients are under home isolation or in quarantine facilities to prevent the disease from spreading further.
Well, the MERS situation really exploded in a relatively short period of time, didn't it?
Yes, it did. And just as concerning as the virus itself is how some false rumors about the virus sparked and stirred public confusion. What is being done to address this issue?
Well, the Korean government says it's going to do more to make sure that clear and accurate information is given to the public. Let's hear what Health Minister had to say in the latest public update.
The virus is not airborne. It can only infect through close contact such as saliva and phlegm. We will provide distinct characteristics of MERS, so false rumors and strange stories can be cut off.
And in an effort to protect children from contracting the disease, about 84 elementary schools and preschools in Gyeonggi-do province, located near the hospital where the 58-year-old woman died, will be temporarily closed for a week. This was based on a decision made by school administrators and parents. Korea has also placed a temporary travel ban on anyone under quarantine as a preventive measure. Now, this is critical considering Korea now has the highest number of confirmed MERS cases in Asia. And the man with MERS who traveled to China is now under quarantine there. Reports indicate that he has been put on supplemental oxygen, but is in stable condition.
But the Korean government has been under public scrutiny for insufficient initial response. They're desperately trying to make up for their shortcomings.
That's right. Well, Hyun-bin, one move was to hold an emergency meeting today. Could you tell us more about that?
Sure thing. The ministers in charge of health, state affairs, and other related agencies vowed at the meeting to do everything they can to stop the spread of the disease, calling it a matter directly linked to public health and safety. Acting Prime Minister Choi Kyung-hwan said the government will mobilize the country's health and medical resources to eradicate MERS and dispel concerns about the outbreak. The government is moving quickly to counter criticism about its lax response to the outbreak. But public worries continue to grow, with many feeling like it may be too little, too late. Health experts say the initial early response is critical in tackling the virus, as there is currently no vaccine for the illness. There are drugs being developed. However, experts say it will take years for it to become available. Back to you guys.
Well, thank you, Hyunbin, for that. We look forward to more updates from you in our later newscast. Well, the growing MERS scare is dealing a new blow to the Korean economy.
That's right. And the country's tourism industry is taking a hit, with Asian tourists now avoiding Korea as their travel and shopping destination. Our Hwang Ji-hye tells us more.
The deadly coronavirus, known as Middle East Respiratory Syndrome or MERS, is spreading quickly in Korea, raising concerns all over the nation. Korea's neighbors in Asia are also taking notice and responding in a way that's hurting the country's tourism industry. According to the Korea Tourism Organization, more than 1,200 tourists from Taiwan canceled flights to Korea for the months of June and July. On top of that, Korea's top travel agency Hana Tour has confirmed that about 300 Chinese tourists have also canceled their trips to Korea over the next 2 weeks amid growing fears about the MERS outbreak.
My parents called after hearing about the MERS outbreak in Korea. They were very concerned and told me to be careful.
Now that Korea has confirmed a tertiary infection of MERS, many people are also starting to avoid crowded places like department stores to prevent contracting the respiratory disease. The outbreak is also expected to take a toll on Korea's construction industry, as authorities are advising companies to refrain from sending people to countries in the Middle East like Saudi Arabia, where the first case of MERS was found in 2012. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
And moving on to local politics, where a possible deadlock between the ruling Saenuri Party and the presidential office lingers over a bill that gives lawmakers the right to request changes to executive orders. While the opposition party expresses strong opposition against President Park Geun-hye's comments indicating that she's prepared to veto the bill, attention is shifting to what will happen next if the president actually wields her executive power. Park Ji-won reports.
What happens if President Park Geun-hye decides to veto a bill that has already passed the National Assembly? According to Article 53, Paragraph 2 of Korea's Constitution, a vetoed bill returns to the Assembly within 15 days with a written letter explaining the objection and a request for it to be reconsidered. The bill is put to a vote again if the returned bill is listed up at a plenary session. Paragraph 4 of the same article states that if the Assembly passes the bill again with more than half its total members in attendance and with at least 2/3 of those present voting in favor, the president's veto is overridden and the bill becomes law.
The Constitution gives the president the right to veto a bill. However, the Constitution also acknowledges that a bill vetoed by the president should pass if most Assembly members, who are the representatives of the people, support and agree on it. That's because the Assembly's will is considered closer to the will of the people.
So then the question becomes, will Korea's rival parties release the controversial bill for a vote? And if they do, would it pass? If the bill fails to be listed at the full Assembly, it will be scrapped next May when all the lawmakers' terms end. The bill allowing the Assembly to request changes to presidential ordinances passed last Friday with 211 voting in favor among the 244 members attending the session. The sheer strength of support is why some watchers say the bill may be able to pass the Assembly again. The rebel camps are split on the matter. The ruling party is gathering opinions from lawmakers and legal experts, and lawmakers close to President Park are voicing their concerns. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy says the presidential office should just respect the National Assembly's decisions. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
The government has opened its 12th Innovation Center, aiming to foster Korea's startups and help them expand their business overseas. And our Choi Yu-sun tells us more about the new center in the country's southwest, which will focus on entrepreneurship in agriculture, tourism, and biochemical development.
There were just over 1,200 agri-food startups launched last year, representing just about 5% of all new venture companies. But the government is hoping to change that by teaming up with conglomerate GS Group at its latest innovation center in the southwestern Jeollanam-do province, where they will create a $9 million fund to foster startups in the field. Bringing together existing agri-food startup agencies, the center will offer a comprehensive support system in areas ranging from technology and funding to marketing and distribution. Similar agencies in the fisheries sector are also planning to join.
전남혁신센터는 미래 비전과 기업가 정신을 갖고 농수산 분야 벤처에 뛰어들고자 하는 청년 창업자들의 창업 인큐베이팅 캠프가 될 것입니다.
The Agriculture Ministry expects to expand new agri-food startups to 10% of total ventures by 2020, which will generate an estimated 12,000 new jobs along the way. GS will share its know-how in product development, marketing, and distribution for overseas markets to help the entrepreneurs take their products beyond Korea. The Korean government also plans to work with GS to develop tour programs to bring foreigners to Korea's culturally rich southwest.
무한한 관광 잠재력에다가 창의성에 기반을 둔 다양한 콘텐츠가 결합이 된다면 관광 산업은 지역 경제를 이끌어갈 핵심 산업으로 성장할 것입니다.
Last but not least, the government and GS are set to establish a biochemical ecosystem in the region with the hope of meeting the rising global demand for eco-friendly chemical products. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories, Korea's current account surplus streak continued for a 38th straight month in April. But it's not the best kind of surplus, as imports and exports are both on the decline. A trend, some experts say, that could continue for some time. Our Kwon So-hwa help us look between the numbers.
In the black again. Korea's current account surplus has been there for the longest period since the late 80s, when the country locked current account surpluses from June 1986 to July 1989. Bank of Korea data released Tuesday showed the surplus in April reached around $8.1 billion. That's a 13.7% rise from the same month last year. The balance of goods in April hit an on-month record high of almost $12.6 billion. While the central bank expects the current account surplus to reach a record high of $96 billion this year, it's not necessarily good news. The surplus comes amid a downward trend of both imports and exports. During the month, exports fell 11% on year, while imports dipped at an even faster rate of nearly 18%, with falling global oil pinpointed as the main cause of the decline.
The current account surplus we're seeing right now is actually reflective of the sluggish economy. And if the surplus continues to grow at such a high rate, there's also the problem of a continuous appreciation of the Korean won.
So although a current account surplus is usually seen as a good factor for a country's economy, the excessive surplus paired with a weakening Japanese yen could make Korea's price competitiveness in the global market lose even more steam. Kwon So-hwa, Arirang News.
It looks like there will be no joint celebration between the two Koreas for the anniversary of a landmark statement later this month. Last month, civilian groups from South and North Korea agreed to co-organize a 3-day event in Seoul starting June 14th to mark the 15th anniversary of the so-called June 15th Declaration. But according to a statement released by the South Korean Preparatory Committee today, North Korea has backed away from the plan, saying it would be better to hold separate celebrations. The South Korean committee said, however, it will continue efforts to change the North's position on the matter.
Turning our focus to national defense, South Korea and the U.S. have established 4 principles that will guide the two allies in their decision-making and operations to counter the growing missile threat from North Korea. Seoul and Washington will also conduct weapons of mass destruction exploitation training in the U.S. every 2 to 3 years from now on. For details, let's turn to our Na Hyun-kyung.
The first of the 4 principles outlined by South Korea and the U.S. is that the allies will employ missile defense capabilities that are based on a combined assessment of North Korea's missile threats. This was stated in the 2015 Strategic Digest published Tuesday by the UN Command, the ROK U.S. Combined Forces Command, and the U.S. Forces Korea. The second principle is for the two countries to enhance their military proficiency through combined exercises, while the third is to support capabilities required to implement the so-called 4D lines of effort. The 4D strategy is a concept endorsed by Seoul and Washington at the Security Consultative Meeting in October last year. It urges the allies to detect, defend, disrupt, and destroy North Korean ballistic missile threats. The concept applies in armistice, crisis, and war, and is said to utilize South Korea's kill chain missile defense system, the Korean air and missile defense system, and Washington's capabilities on and off the Korean peninsula. The last principle states that the allies' missile defense operations will be based on bilateral consultation. Meanwhile, the booklet also revealed that South Korean forces and U.S. troops conducted weapons of mass destruction exploitation training in June last year at the U.S. National Training Center in California. The exercises were aimed at increasing interoperability to maintain a WMD deterrent on the peninsula, and the sessions are tentatively scheduled to take place once every 2 to 3 years. 나현경, Arirang News.
The circle of life is a recurring theme in many works of art. Sometimes it's quite simple to grasp, other times not so much.
Sometimes you need to feel, not think. Well, whether or not you're into the art scene, an authentic soul-searching experience can be had by paying a visit to the Seoul Museum. Our Kim Ji-hye helps us get better acquainted with hyperrealism, blowing reality out of proportion.
All is vanity. This is the message distilled through the latest exhibition set to open at the Seoul Museum, where art is on display, representing pieces that go against modern thinking, that adding more is a key to nourishing one's life.
You write about something that you most value in life, whether it's love, friendship, or happiness, and then it's printed out in one of the branches of this tree and then falls down as leaves. This interactive art installation demonstrates that, just as in life, the things we hold most dear can also fade with time.
At the center of this program is hyperrealist art, which turns reality into illusion. And a major artist in this movement is Sam Jenks, an Australian artist who's taken hyperrealism to the next level, with replicas of humans made with silicon. His works portrayed the beginning of life or near death, themes he tried to accept and understand as part of something larger than oneself.
My own fears of death and what's associated with that made me attempt to confront it in some way so that it wasn't so frightening. But the experience of holding a newborn baby, it's as alien in many ways as holding a different creature altogether. If you look at it as birth and death, it can feel tragic, but if you're experiencing it in terms of like some sort of revolving, cycle, then it makes it easier to deal with.
And the astonishing similarities between Jenks' sculptures and real human beings are largely due to the materials he uses.
I've always loved detailed work, and even fine jewellery or things that are finely made or carefully made. They tend to last because people treasure them in some way. And I think with this work over here, the woman and child sculpture, I did spend a lot of time refining the detail in the skin to try and give it an extra level of detail that as people moved into it, they can continue enjoying it as they get closer and closer.
The exhibition opens this Friday and will run through August 9th. Kim Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Now it's time to take a look at the top international headlines. Let's connect to our Paul Yi at the News Center.
Our focus today, hundreds remain missing in China after the sinking of a passenger ship. Malaysia Airlines slashes its workforce, and a former Olympian turned reality TV star takes social media by storm.
Well, Paul, let's start on a rather somber note. In mainland China, full-scale rescue operations are underway to find survivors of a tragic sinking of a cruise boat. Can you give us the latest?
Well, rescue crews were able to safely bring to shore 3 more people on Tuesday, bringing the total number saved to 15. However, that still leaves more than 400 who are still unaccounted for after the ship capsized last night. Local media there say at least 6 people have been confirmed dead. The government has dispatched 3,000 emergency personnel and over 150 rescue vessels to the disaster site. Underwater divers have been trying to pull out more trapped passengers. However, efforts are being hampered by strong winds and heavy rains. This as search teams reportedly heard survivors calling out from within the overturned hull. According to the ship's captain, the boat sank within minutes after being caught in a storm as it departed from the city of Nanjing towards Chongqing along the Yangtze River. And turning to Malaysia, the country's flagship carrier has announced it will lay off 6,000 of its employees in an attempt to save the company from financial ruin. Malaysia Airlines said Monday that it would be cutting 1/3 of its staff and scrapping some international routes as part of a major restructuring plan. The CEO of Malaysia Airlines, Christoph Mueller, hoped the airline would return into the black within 2 to 3 years.
Is what we currently assume in our financial projection, but you see the airline business is unfortunately not so easy because what we have seen in US dollar ringgit volatility over the last 6 months, what we have seen in US dollar fuel price volatility over the last 12 months.
Mueller also explained that the decline started long before last year's back-to-back air disasters involving flight MH370, which still remains missing to this day, as well as the passenger jet MH17 that was shot down over eastern Ukraine, killing all 298 people on board. And finally, the former U.S. Olympic athlete turned reality TV star Bruce Jenner has announced a dramatic life transition to the public as a woman. Her name, Caitlyn Jenner. The 65-year-old made the revelation on the latest cover for Vanity Fair magazine. Social media outlets from Twitter to Facebook were abuzz over the news, with many celebrities voicing their support, including Ellen DeGeneres and Sam Smith. LGBT groups praised the response as a sign of changing attitudes.
I grew up in the era when the only thing you had was Jerry Springer or Maury Povich, and so it was very sensationalized, trivialized portrayals of transgender people. What we saw with the Diane Sawyer interview and what's followed since is a really respectful way of reporting trans people's transition stories or identities.
Jenner had become the most high-profile American to identify as transgender following a televised interview back in April. Her Twitter account has since exploded, breaking the record for the fastest user to reach 1 million followers. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Another sunny day is in store tomorrow across the nation. Lingering rain in Jeju will eventually let up, leading to brighter skies. But those along the west coast should beware of strong winds that are forecast to sweep in. And most regions will experience very high UV levels, so those headed outdoors should take extra precautions. Unprotected skin could be damaged and burn quickly, and it's also best to try and avoid the sun between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. And sizzling conditions are set to continue tomorrow as well. Southern regions, including Daegu, will see temperatures getting up to 30s again on Wednesday. So let's take a closer look at the readings for tomorrow. The daytime high here in Seoul and Gwangju will make it to 29. Daegu will soar to 31, while Busan tops out at 27 tomorrow afternoon. And as for the other regions, it seems like Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 28 and 23, and it will be a lot breezier day for Dokdo, topping out at 22. It seems like the heat wave is likely to continue through the end of the week under mostly sunny skies here in the capital. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's a perfect place to be for those who dread to turn the last page. And that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Do join us again, same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.